What's up guys, DukeSloth here, and today we're taking a look at the patch notes for patch 6.1, the season 6 update again, but for a good reason, because now we have the information about Merlin. And not only that, we also have some other additional information. We're going to go through all of them again, for those of you who want to see the whole thing, but we're primarily going to focus on Merlin and then do the rest a bit quicker, because we already talked about most of that. So if you want to see that in more in depth, then you can check out the other video. So Merlin, the Master Wizard, is making it into SMITE. And we have his whole kit here. We're going to scroll past that real quick and just quickly look at the skins first, because I think we're going to stick to Merlin for a while longer. We have a new Achilles skin, which I think looks very cool, but not so cool without the armor, because he doesn't have a helmet then. We have a new Freya skin, Lady of the Lake, inspired by Arthur, basically, or by the Arthurian lore here. We have a new Sun Wukong skin, Infinite Shift, which is basically a body-less skin. As you can see, it has like different parts. I think the effects on the skin especially are really cool. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Sun Wukong fan, so I don't personally like... I'm a fan of this skin in itself, but I like the concept, and I think this theme is very good and very refreshing in SMITE. Anubis gets a boxer skin, heavy hitter. The interesting thing about this skin are primarily the abilities, where you can see like boxing gloves coming up. I think the patch notes video with the review will only be coming up after this, or like the live view, sorry, where you can see the abilities pretty well. He also has boxing glove coming out in his ultimate and stuff. It's interesting how they change all his animations to be a bit more agile, even though he's such an immobile god. Then we have Scylla, Dragon Empress, literally just a recolor for the Switch specifically, but yeah, that's it. We have Guan Yu Gladiator. I know a lot of people don't like this skin. It's the ranked reward skin. I actually like the skin a lot. I don't know, some people seem to think it's a tier 2 skin, even though it's pretty drastically changed. I think it's very cool. We have Nemesis Scarlet Judgement, which is literally just a recolor of another Nemesis skin of Elegant Nemesis, I think, so whatever. And we have Baron Samedi in gold and white, and this is going to be the no BM reward. If you didn't get banned or anything like that, then this one is for you, and I think it looks really, really cool, especially in game as well. Then we have Chibi Sol. Yep. It's a Chibi skin. I don't think I need to say more. And we have Merlin's Mastery skin. Now, a lot of these skins will also be in the bundle for the Battle Pass that we have now, but we get to that after we talk about Merlin. So, Merlin has 3 stances, 2 unique abilities per stance, and then special effects on the ultimate per stance as well. And then 1 ability across all 3 stances. That's his mobility ability. And we will just go through all of them in the order they are here. The passive is Overload. Every time Merlin casts a spell, he gains a stack of Overload. When Merlin next fires a basic attack, it will be augmented with Lightning, dealing extra damage to the first enemy. Deals extra 10 damage plus 15% of your magical power, 3 charges, duration 5 seconds. So as a whole, you can get 45% extra scaling on your basics across 3 basic attacks. Now, this is actually interesting, because I think you cannot uncharge all charges at once. I think you have to throw 3 basics for that, and the duration with 5 seconds is not that long, so you really have to weave in those basic attacks in your combo, which is, to be honest, a little bit awkward with Merlin, because he has to spam a lot of his abilities, from what I can tell, in a fight to deal the most damage. So this is going to be something that you really have to get into the habit of, which makes it more mechanically demanding, which makes it interesting as a passive. Obviously not a super strong passive, because he has a lot of other things going for him. We will see if this actually activates item proc, so that might make it a lot stronger. The first one is, well, just 3 abilities: Eclipse, Radiate, and Frostbolt. Eclipse is the Arcane Stance ability. Merlin conjures an orb of condensed celestial energy that grows in size as it travels, dealing damage every 0.4 seconds and marking enemies hit. Enemies marked take additional damage if they stay within the outer range of the eclipse. So this sounds super weird. Ideally, you look at it, how it looks like, because it's like a cone with a spinning orb that comes from the middle and then goes forward and goes bigger and bigger and bigger. And if it touches anything, it gets a secondary circle around it, and then it will stop, and it will fire projectiles at enemies that either touch it or have touched it during the travel in this particular area, as long as they stay in this area. So some sort of AoE ticking, clear, weird ability. Very unique, very strange, I would say. And then you have an initial damage of 120, and then the mark damage of 45 in each of these shots. But there are multiple shots as well. So the initial shot does 70% scaling, up to 120 damage, which is not like too bad, but also not too high. And then the additional damage is really like more focused on the base damage with 45 per hit and then 10% scaling. Not that much in scaling, but a lot of base damage. But you can also walk out of it relatively quickly, I would say, if this ability is used on its own. You can see like initial radius 5, but the final radius is 15. And the radius, if you hit an enemy, is even larger. I will not crunch all the numbers in like depth in how much they will do, because it's going to take a little bit too long here. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. But so far, an interesting ability. And we will look at the second ability later and see why it works that way. His fire stance ability is Radiate. Merlin generates a beam of intense fire for 2 seconds that deals damage every 0.5 seconds. Each time Radiate hits an enemy, it also applies a burn, dealing additional damage over time. This one is very straightforward. He holds his arm out, channels a straight beam, and then is taking damage with that. And it can obviously be interrupted as well. So the damage is up to 50 per initial hit, with, as far as I understand it. Oh no, wait, it's the beam that does 50. Okay, that makes more sense. So the beam itself does 50 every 0.5 seconds. I think that means it's a 5 tick thing, because it would have the first tick at 0 and then the second tick at 0.5. Sometimes it's not. It really depends on how it's done exactly. But in either case, it's going to be, well, let's say somewhere between 200 and 250 damage, but then also an additional 35% scaling, meaning we are looking at 150-ish. Well, again, it depends. Maybe up to 175% scaling if it's like that all the way. And then you also have these additional ticks on top of that, which are another 25 base damage and 5% scaling. So less scaling here, but more of the base damage. Now, the dot duration itself is also 2 seconds. I am not sure how this... I don't think this stacks. I don't think this dot stacks. I think it refreshes, but I'm not sure how often it refreshes in the context of the initial burn. In either case, it's probably going to scale pretty high and also do pretty decent base damage here overall. Third ability, Frostbolt, a lot more straightforward. Merlin hits a Frostbolt that explodes if it hits an enemy, dealing additional 20% damage if they are slowed. Damage 60 to 220, plus 70% of your magical power and scaling. Extra damage if slow, 20%, range 70, 60 mana, and a 10 radius AoE. But on the 6 seconds cooldown, not a good clearing tool, because you have to... as soon as you hit anything, it detonates, so it stops there. But a very good poke tool with a long-range, short cooldown, which I think could actually become one of the bigger problems, because the damage is still pretty good for a 6-second cooldown ability, so you can do a lot of poke with this. And that brings us to the second abilities. Vortex, in the arcane sense, Merlin deploys a field of energy allocation. After shot delayed, the vortex deals damage and pulls enemies toward the center. So imagine a Nox kind of silence AoE that like detonates after a while, but instead of silencing and instead of doing damage only, it detonates and deals damage in that moment and pulls enemies to the center, kind of like a Susanoo 2, but into the center of the circle. And that is why I said the first ability in arcane sense is kind of interesting, because that can kind of make the damage a bit more reliable. At the same time, this ability has no CC in it, and it takes quite a while until it actually pops. So if the enemy has any mobility or good awareness, they can get out of this pretty easily most of the time and will not get pulled. 170 damage plus 60% scaling, 60 units range, and a radius of 20 with 0.5 seconds deploy time. A cooldown scaling down to 12 seconds here is pretty interesting as well. So you can also use this quite often. Dragonfire, Merlin summons forth 2 ethereal dragons that spout flames towards each other, dealing damage to enemies every 0.25 seconds. If caught in the center of the area, enemies' protections are reduced. The dragons last for 3 seconds. So this is, well, depending on, again, how it starts, it's like 4 ticks per second. Yeah, it should be around 12-ish ticks, again, depending on how exactly it will work. Which also means it's a solid amount of damage, 240, I think, in total from the ticks, plus 25% scaling. Wow, that's a lot of scaling. So like 300% scaling, I think, if it all hits. But at the same time, it's never all gonna hit. You're not gonna have someone in the center the whole time. Because it's 2 cones and they really have to be in the middle of these cones. So maybe if you like slow them first and then pull them into the center and then drop that, nah, probably not. I don't know. I don't think you will ever really get the full damage out of it. But if you do, or if somebody else CCs long enough for you, that damage is ridiculous, and you can add your secondary burn to that, and you can just fry an enemy. So against enemies that are not paying attention, or enemies that have to stay in place, this is going to hurt. Like Anubis is gonna absolutely hate this, or dealing with this in any situation. I think against an Anubis, you might as well just stay in fire stance and not even clear anymore, because you just fry the Anubis immediately. The damage here is one thing, the cooldown is another, with 12 seconds also relatively short, and the protection shred is obviously also very interesting. Up to 2.5%, we were talking about protection shred very recently, and now we have another boy on the field, and this one has up to 8 stacks as well. So this guy gets 20% protection shred. 20% protection shred from that ability maximum. You have to hit 8 ticks, which is very, very hard to do. And they have to stay in the center of this ability. It doesn't matter like if they get hit on the outside, they have to be in the center for the shred to be applied. So very, very hard. At the same time, what will all of this tell you? He has a lot of ticking damage. He's going to do very, very well with Spear of the Magus. And if you have this shred and Spear of the Magus, and I think you're pretty much set. I don't think you need more than that, really. And time to apply, 0.5 seconds again. So again, a bit of delay. A lot of his abilities play with this, are very strong, but also have a lot of delay kind of thing. Blizzard, Ice Stance. Merlin creates a blizzard at the target location. After a brief delay, speaking of which, shards of ice start hurling down every 0.5 seconds. Enemies take damage and progressively get more slowed while they stay in the area. Damage per tick, 70 plus 120%. 70 plus 20% scaling, sorry. 70 per tick is actually quite a fair bit, but we again have to look at the duration here. 4 seconds. 4 seconds, and we can assume that therefore it's either 8 or 9 ticks, again, depending on how it works. Let's just say it's 8 ticks. That would still be quite a lot. Looking at 560 base here, and 160% scaling. Not bad at all. It's interesting how some of these stances seem to have very different scalings and different base values overall. Like Blizzard seems to work a lot better with base values, and others work better with scalings. So yeah, also worth keeping in mind. Radius of 20, time to deploy, again 0.5 seconds, and a slow that has up to 5 stacks, but only slows for 8. So you want to hit multiple of those slows, and that's kind of hard because, again, it has a delay and the enemy can just walk out of it. I think Merlin is just going to do extremely well paired with other gods that have a ton of CC. If you have anyone who can just lock down enemies, and you have so many options in every stance to do so much damage, but your own lockdown is restricted. You have the pull in the cane stance, and you have the slows in the ice stance, but nothing that's really like standing out. We're getting to one more thing though. Then we have Flicker, all stances. Merlin quickly teleports a short distance in front of him. Range 30, mini blink with 18 seconds cooldown, max rank. Nothing else, just so he has some mobility, some safety, but nothing that should like outright break him. It's very interesting. Like a blink mechanic obviously is uncounterable, which can be very frustrating because you can go through walls, like short walls, not the Conquest walls, more like Odin walls or something. You can juke a lot of high damaging abilities instantly. All that kind of stuff, which can be very, very frustrating. At the same time, it's very easy to follow an enemy like that. It's very easy to chase them, especially if they have very limited CC, because you can just keep your escape up or your engage up and blink in, for example, as a jungle, and then just jump on them and just make quick work of them. And then we have Elemental Mastery, all stances. Merlin taps into his inner potential, blah, 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 blah. So what he does is he explodes outside in the with the damage of the stance that he's in, and we get to what that specifically does. And then you have a bit of time to change your stance. Otherwise, it will change automatically to the next stance, I think. But you can press your ability buttons to choose another stance. And then the moment the stance is decided, either by you or automatically, the AoE that went out comes in the stance that you're turning into. So if you're in Arcane before and you've turned to fire, then you have Arcane damage outside and then fire damage inside. So the explosion damage here is 260 plus 20% of your magical power. Low scaling, high base. But I think it's twice, which is actually a lot. I'm not sure how this is going to work because it must be 520, sorry. 520 just for a stance swap, if I understand correctly, on a very short cooldown as well. Ooh. I'm not sure if this is like, if I'm reading this right or wrong. Then you have the fire stance giving you a bit of burn damage on top of that. It's not actually described here, but this is fire stance. 25 plus 5% of your magical power. Burn interval 0.5 seconds. Duration 1.5 seconds. So that's not going to be too much, actually. Not too much extra damage here. Just a little bit, you know, on the top. But the other stances, which I think is unfortunate because I like the fire stance in concept the most, but the other stances have some more stuff. The knock back in the arcane stance. It was called a knock up on the patch notes show, so I'm not quite sure which one this will be. But, well, either of those or a 20% slow in the frost stance. So if you go arcane to frost or other way around, you have double CC. If you go into fire from any of the stances, you add some damage to the CC. Cooldown here goes from 28 to 20 seconds, meaning if you go full CDR and you build something like Chronos Pendant, you can like realistically go down to like 10-ish seconds. And yeah, there's some items that you probably want on him. They were actually already mentioned on the patch notes, so I didn't even have to think, but those were like the first thoughts that I had. A, Spear of the Magus because of all the dot damage, and B, Gem of Isolation because he doesn't have that much CC and you want to have something that sets up all this damage that he does. And Gem of Isolation does that very well. And outside of that, obviously, a ton of cooldown. You have to keep in mind, again, he has at least 1% protection shred that you can work with. If you don't want to go into that, you can get away without it, possibly. And he also is just overall very damage heavy, I think, from what it seems so far. So I think he will be able to deal with most enemies that way, and you would rather just go into more cooldown direction to really spam this kit and especially spam the stance swap as well. So yeah, that's it for Merlin so far. I think with him finding out at all how balanced he is or isn't is pretty much impossible because it's gonna take a while for this god to be learned properly. People will have to learn to swap at the right time. They will have to learn to use the basics in between the swaps and in between everything else. They'll have to learn the proper builds. They have to learn to use the blink properly and learn how aggressive you can play with him. So whatever we're going to see now may not be representative of what we'll see later. Same with counterplaying him. I think it's going to be quite a while until people figure out just how much you can do against him with sufficient mobility. And until that's the case, yeah, it's just gonna be, I think, like, as soon as people catch on, they're gonna be like super high aggression plays against Merlin because there's very little he can do against that. And Merlin players will also find their playstyle to combat that, but he's gonna be even harder to tell in his position, I think, than King Arthur is. So that's my verdict for now. And with that, let's quickly look at the voice packs of skins here. Starting with Achilles. Turn your headphones down, potentially, because this might be loud.
I serve the one true king.
Come, rest here by the water and feel its aura soothe you.
It has been a long journey and it has brought me here. I shall teach you what I have learned.
Every day is such a hustle. That's because my life is such a bustle.
His voice pack is kind of strange for how he looks, to be honest. All of it.
Once we enter the Colosseum, the only way you leave is in pieces.
Yep,
I've been burning to meet you guys all day! Hi! I'm Sol. Nice to meet you.
Alright. And we have various additions to the awesome chest, which we're not going to go through. Like I said, we're going to speed this up a little bit from here because a lot of this has been done before. We have some fixes for platform-specific skins. We have a new thing called unlimited skins, which are going to be like, you can get them from the event or for a super high price of basically the price of the whole event later if you couldn't get them because you weren't playing at the time yet. We have some updates, which are actually very important here. Glacial Gaze Medusa and the Blight Guardian Athena Ultimate update, because the sounds were way too quiet, and that especially for that Athena skin, I absolutely could not deal with that. Like, fighting against that, you could not hear her. It was nasty. So good, that's nerfed. Various friend list fixes, not going to go through all of them here. The Battle Pass is going to be introduced. No more of the season ticket, and your boosters are going to get switched over to the Battle Pass system as well. So you have Battle Pass boosters instead. And the Battle Pass will include the Sol skin, the Chibi Sol skin, the Anubis boxer skin, the Sun Wukong doesn't have a body skin, and the Nemesis Elegant recolor. Yeah, in my opinion, not the best deal in terms of skins, but that's obviously personal preference here. Triumphant Chest system has been removed because now you get those through the Battle Pass. You don't have to have the Battle Pass for that. You still unlock them otherwise from playing. Unfortunately, that wasn't really clarified entirely in terms of how many chests you'll get, if you will get them as frequently. I kind of doubt that's going to be the case. And also, I think you're going to earn them at a slower rate if you don't buy the Battle Pass. So I think there are a few downsides coming with this. And I really like those free chests, but not getting any more icons now, I suppose. And the season tickets have been removed. What I'm concerned with here is the Battle Pass does not seem to have anything for competitive at all, which really, yeah, I don't know. I thought we wanted to bring more attention to that, not less, and make it the best year for esports ever and not the worst. But maybe it's somewhere else, but it's not in the season ticket anymore and not in the Battle Pass. It seems, unless it's yet to be announced. Project Olympus, crossplay is announced. We've heard that many times now. Cross progression between the different platforms is also announced. There is a whole section on highrestudios.com/crossplay about that if you're wondering about anything specific. I'm pretty sure everything has been answered there multiple times now. Otherwise, in the other patch notes shows, I'm not going to go through that. Roll queue, same thing. You select your preferred two roles, and the matchmaker will try to find a game for you where you can play one of these roles. And there are some special circumstances that's surrounding ranked, etc. Ranked is also going to get changed. Soft reset with the next season, and now the seasons, the splits are significantly shorter, roughly 2 months. You gain TP quicker, and there will be future changes to that that will change some more things. There are also rewards at the end of each split, enticing you to play ranked to some degree. And you also get 50 gems each for each split for 75 wins in ranked. Oh, okay, there you go. And a winner's chest for 15 wins in ranked. So there you go. They want you to play at least 15 ranked games for that winner's chest. Future changes are considered being no longer having qualifying games, but starting in bronze and leveling up really quickly. MMR being shown in the UI, and MMR-based leaderboards that show the highest MMR players. Team badges also removed from the game, but they will now be selectable in your personal section. And then we have kill bounties. The formula has been adjusted for that, so basically killing a higher level player is a little bit more rewarding now when they outlevel you a lot and you just get a kill on them. Other than that, it doesn't really change. We have a new objective on the solo lane Totenhof coup, which is essentially an objective that gives you a buff for your towers, and when you walk into your towers, you get extra movement speed and extra MP5, and also your entire team gets a little bit of gold, 25 gold. This buff lasts for 10 seconds, and totem has to be taken by your team for that. The enemy cannot take the last hit from you. Each team has their own damage counter. It starts with 300 health and then scales up. First one spawns at 1 minute, but they only spawn until 15 minutes. Then they don't exist in the game anymore. Minion spawn time has been adjusted to 1 minute from 1 minute 30, but also the fountain now gives you a movement speed boost at the start of the game to make up for that, just to speed up everything a little bit. Minions have been balanced in various ways. There's also something new here. So brute minions now spawn differently. They don't spawn every third wave anymore or anything like that. They spawn... They do spawn every third wave, but it's a little less irritating. Brutes still spawn every third wave, 1 brute at a time from 0 to 10 minutes. So that's the unchanged part. But after 10 minutes, 1 brute will spawn every wave. After 20 minutes, 2 brutes will spawn every wave. And after 30 minutes, 3 brutes will spawn every wave. And this is important because with the Oni Fury, which we'll talk about in a second, you can get buffed minions, and buffed brutes are pretty strong, so they don't want to overdo that. The Gold Fury gets 2 additional forms, the Oni and the Primal Fury. The Oni Gold Fury buffs your minions, as we just said. The stats were adjusted here from the last patch notes. Now it's 75% bonus damage and 30% bonus health, plus 50 physical protection and 60 magic protection. They were a bit OP before. Now they can still like push 1 tower, but not 3 towers. And the Primal Fury gives your entire team 5% increased damage to jungle, camps, and bosses, including the Fire Giant. The Furies have different gold rewards from the normal one, but that is obvious, and the same XP as the normal Gold Fury, and all 3 rotate randomly. The Pyromancer gives you an indication when the enemy team has the buff, how long it's active for, or that it's still active, so you know that it's still on and they can still run to you very fast. The Fire Giant receives various adjustments to his base stats. They've been overhauled a little bit here and there, again and again. On one hand, because there's this new buff to do more damage to the Fire Giant. On the other hand, because some item changes have been made, and in late game you will be able to deal more damage. And also on the third hand, because he's getting a different attack rotation. The magma pools are back, and that changes everything. So he gets a little bit more health, for example, a little bit more health scaling, and the enhanced version gets a little bit more buffs as well, and protections increased, so that he's a little bit more in line with the other changes, and we'll see how strong he feels now. The jungle gets various changes as well, changing the base health of various smaller camps, and then increasing the health per level, and increasing the magical protection a little bit, so camps will be a little bit tankier later in the game. The Towers and Phoenixes now have a visual effect on them if backdoor protections are currently active on a structure, and if you hit a tower, the backdoor protection will remain down if you had minions in the circle until you leave, so you can keep the protections low for longer if you are able to tank the tower. In terms of item balance, the blessings get some changes. Attacker's Blessing gets a stack doubled that you need to evolve it. It's still going to be super strong. Defender's Blessing gets its stacks increased. It's also getting a health increase by 50 and mana increase by 50. It's probably going to be solid-ish, better than before, but I'm still not sure if it's going to be good. Specialist Blessing gets doubled the MP5 with 20 now, and the stacks to evolve it are increased from 50 to 75. Still a super niche item that I don't think will have much value. Warrior's Blessing gets buffed, increased health and mana restored per trigger from 30 to 40, and Evolved Warrior's Blessing increased evolved bonus protections from 10 to 15. This is a huge buff. Do not underestimate this. This will do a lot for warriors or anyone playing aggressive solo and assassin as well. Horrific Emblem decreased the slow from 40 to 30%, decreased attack speed slow from 25% to 50%, and with the upgrade version, the slow is also decreased, but the attack speed slow is now still 25%, so you have to upgrade that for more attack speed slow. And the damage dealt is reduced from 20% to 15%. Horrific Emblem is still going to be an excellent counter to various hunters in the game. Even the upgrade version didn't lose all that much. And various other basic attackers, don't worry about that. That nerf was absolutely justified. It's still going to be a good item. Consumables, Elixir of Speed. You can sell your boots late game because this thing will give you 18% movement speed permanently. Red Tusk also got an adjustment for that now, by the way, we'll get to. And through that, you have an extra item slot in late game, which is really cool. And we're going to see what people do with that. One new item that I have yet to talk about is Cursed Orb and Doom Orb. Cursed Orb is now the tier 2 version of Doom Orb. It has similar stats to all Doom Orb, but a little bit worse, so that as a bridge item, it'll have a different value now, and Doom Orb will be the one you can upgrade to into late game with 135 magical power, 200 mana, 25 MP5, 6% movement speed, and an extra up to 30 power from stacks and 5% movement speed. I will talk about this very soon, and if you should upgrade it and when and blah, 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 blah. We get into that. Book of Souls decreased the magical power by 10, and Book of Thoth now works a little bit differently. It's a bit cheaper, but now the power is from items only, or from the mana from items only. So you have to build items with mana to get a lot of power of this. Otherwise, it's just not going to be worth it for you anymore because the power of itself will not be high enough to warrant the whole stacking thing when you have to get other mana items, really, yeah. So Reaver gets a little bit of a nerf, so that a second instance of damage from an ability, or like second instance of damage to a target will now only deal 50% of the bonus damage with Soul Reaver instead of 100% for both. And this reduction lasts for 3 seconds and refreshes on hit, so if you keep spamming abilities, then you will always only get the 50% of the damage and not the 100%. Obsidian Shard gets a cost increase from 2,150 to 2,300, and the magical power from 60 to 70. This could be a bit critical. I've already talked about this item in the context of magical penetration recently, so you can check that out if you're more interested in that. Typhon's Fang gets its lifesteal increased. I've also made a whole video on that from 10 to 15% and how the impact of that is. You can check that out if you want to know more. Dynasty Playtime gets its magical power increased from 45 to 55, and I am curious if that will be enough to make it compete with the other helmets again, because Dynasty Playtime was always an interesting item. Stone of Binding gets its magical power increased from 20 to 30, and the passive has changed, so now that instead of giving penetration to allies, you reduce the target's protections by 15. This is going to be scary. Again, I talked about this in the same penetration protection reduction video as Obsidian Shard, and this will probably push Stone of Binding for certain gods even more. Malice gets a new passive, which is now successful hitting an enemy with a critical strike subtracts 2 seconds from all the abilities currently on cooldown except your ultimate ability. This can only happen once every 5 seconds, which is, in my opinion, super weird, and I don't know how to feel about it at all. And I don't think a lot of people are going to use it because I just get straight up CDR instead. Poison Star increased price from 2,400 to 2,500, decreased critical strike chance from 20% to 15%. Very justified changes here. I think it's still going to be picked up, just not quite as frequently and not as much without other crit items. Wind Demon decreased the cost from 2,700 to 2,600. Always in an awkward place, maybe a little bit better now, especially in specific matchups where you want to have a bit of extra mobility. Think, for example, Merlin. Odysseus' Bow increased basic attack power scaling on the passive from 50 to 60%. This is really scary because Odysseus' Bow is also an item that I think is very strong already. It's going to be even stronger now, and it's going to be fun because when it's stronger and late game items are a thing and the 6th slot is open, then Odysseus' Bow is a good choice. Severance Bow increased physical power from 20 to 30, probably won't do much. We'll look into this in the future in detail. Runic Shield increased health from 100 to 150. Yep, good change, good buff, makes it better and more usable. And Scylla increased the cost from 2,000 to 2,150. Absolutely fair, that item was way too strong for what it offered. Cudgel increased physical power from 5 to 10 and decreased health from 100 to 50. A bit more of an aggressive shift here, and we'll see the same with I'm going to say it the same way I said last time because you guys enjoyed it so much. Shalala. Decreased cost from 1,500 to 1,300, and physical power increased from 10 to 15. Again, a bit more of an aggressive choice. Blackthorn Hammer increased physical power from 25 to 35, and the cooldown reduction to mana transition, or mana regeneration transition now happens instead of at 50, but it now happens at 25% mana, which is going to make this very interesting because the thing already has a lot going for it. Now it's even more power, CDR most of the time, and MP5 only when you really need it. Super strong item in my opinion at this point, and yeah, scary, definitely scary. Also more scary, Runeforged Hammer. Increased physical power from 40 to 55, decreased health from 250 to 200. More damage here as well, more damage output. Loses a little bit of health, but I think that is more than fair. 55, very much on the top end of power items right there. No penetration, obviously, so not as ability focused, but especially when you are a god that also uses basics decently. I'm looking at Osiris super hard for this one, and I think it's gonna be scary. And then we've Gauntlet of Thebes getting its health increase from 200 to 275. Still probably going to be a bit of a slower early, looking at the stats that it offers at the start. I don't know, but it could be more interesting now, and as it is with support meta, it gets picked up a few times and then everyone's building it all the time, it's suddenly meta, or it's not. We'll find out if the health change here is enough, because typically you still work so well with protections early in the game. It also depends on how high aggression the meta is, really. Emerald Talisman increased MP5 from 6 to 10, whatever. Son of Gaia increases speed with a heal or curse from 10 to 5 seconds, so twice as fast, and decreased internal cooldown from 60 to 45 seconds. More of a situational counter for certain knock-up comps now, which could be interesting. We'll see how much that really does it, because it's still like, it's just a raw health item, and that's always a bit awkward. Shield of Regrowth, decreased cost from 2,100 to 2,000, increase HP 5 from 10 to 15, increase MP 5 from 10 to 15. Still, I think the guards that used it before will use it, no one else will use it, really, for now. Then it doesn't charge, basically. Spectral Armor, increased physical protection from 60 to 70, decreased damage dealt to you from critical strikes from 60 to 50%. Very strong changes here. I've compared this to Nemean in the past. Now they are much closer and have their own value, and you have an extra slot so you can fit both into the same build a lot better. Definitely an interesting change. Masks. Luna's Mask gets the damage increase. No, the other way around. The the damage is reduced from 20. Is reduced by 25% instead of 20%, and the healing is reduced by 25% instead of 20%, because it was a bit too good, a bit oppressive. Unfortunate, because I really like the way it works currently, but it's understandable. Rangus Mass increased ability damage dealt from 15 to 20%, so now that the basic attack and the ability damage increase are the same, which is going to be very scary for a few specific characters, like Achilles. Bumper's Mask increased physical power from 20 to 30 and magical power from 50 to 65. Morrigan is happy, and most others don't really mind, I guess. Maybe Aqua, who knows. Warriors all get a base HP increased by 10, and the base HP per level for warriors is increased by 3. So, decent amount of extra health throughout here, 70 extra health in total, which is very, very nice for all warriors. MC gets buffs to the cooldown of his Swarm, which is decreased by 1 second across all ranks. And Honey gets his mana cost decreased. I don't think this is really going to change much about the character. Anubis gets the stun duration on his Mummify improved. Still the same end duration of 2 seconds, but starting at 1.6 instead of 1.2, which makes for a lot more nasty early game plays. And I think Anubis is going to be interesting and scary potentially with the other item changes that we have. Wukong, Dragon King's Sword. A new passive, because the lifesteal on his passive is now removed. Instead, now he gets a heal and cooldown reduced to the ability that he's using. So you have up to 3 stacks, and they stack in 1 minute, and then you use an ability. The cooldown is immediately reduced by 2 seconds, and you get 5% of your health back, which is, you know, pretty interesting. Bacchus becomes a god of the gods. He was an absolute unit before, but now he's a real unit. Chuck is available at level 1 and has a rank 0. Doesn't provide any protections, costs 35 mana, and Chuck now provides 40% Dracometer at all ranks. Chuck away, Bacchus is finally good. We find out where he's good, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be good. Bastet, Razor Whip, increased physical power scaling from 20% to 25% per tick. So that's pretty cool. That's a little bit more damage here and there, and that is going to matter. And Declaw also decreased the mana cost from 70 to 90 to 60 at all ranks, so you don't run out of mana as often, which is another problem with Bastet. Just meaning you can be a little bit more aggressive with your abilities. Samedi. With his skin, he gets some nerfs. Consigned Spirits decreased bonus healing based on missing health from 12.5% to 10%, and Life of the Party decreased total health damage from 15% to 10%. Taking out the percentage numbers is a very good decision here, making him a lot more balanced overall. Bellona, Eagles rarely increased base damage from 100 to 500 to 140 to 500. Nice little tweak here, might help her, but she might still be good in the upcoming meta either way. Also, maybe a Runeforged candidate here. Tectonic Shift on Cabrakan gets its width increased so that it really hits everything in front of him all the time now when he uses it, which is very good actually for him. I think it's actually a solid buff, as much as it may not sound like it from the units and everything. Camazot's Vampire Butts increase buff duration from 210 to 300 seconds and persist through death. Mostly quality of life, to be honest. It obviously a buff, but I think it just feels a lot nicer for him this way, and I think that's a fair change. Camelots might come back with a new meta anyway, so in solo, we'll see. Kununos decreased cooldown from Wild Hunt from 100 to 90 seconds. Fair enough. That's most guards anyways. Bramble Blast increased base damage from 40 to 200 to 60 to 200, so a little bit more of a hit with Bramble Blast early game, finally. Fafnir Draconic Corruption increased Dragon Breath from 20 to 40 plus 10% of your magical power to 20 to 60 plus 10% of your magical power, meaning that Dragon Boy gets a lot more damage in the late game when he fries his enemies, which is fun. I like it a lot. Hera Argus the Defender increased cooldown from 70 to 90 seconds. Very fair. No more Argus all the time. Hercules Excavate decreased cooldown from 90 to 90 down to 70 seconds. Very scary. I don't know how to feel about this. I don't want to get spammed by Excavates by Herc, but he's been out for a while, so I guess it's fair enough. Goddess of Demonetization gets increased range of Dispel Magic from 40 to 55. And also gets Circle of Protection, increased range from 35 to 40. Meaning she is safer to play now, she can apply her things at long ranges, and that's very nice for her, and that might actually help her. Not sure if it's enough to actually push her into the meta. Arthur gets a bunch of fixes here, which I'm not going through again. I did that last time. You can read it right now if you want to. But yeah, it's mostly making him less jittery, not proccing the wrong things, not crashing in the ultimate, and not having other awkward interactions with that. The relevant part here outside of that, Twin Cleave and Blade Stomp, increased energy gained from 1 to 2 per hit off the entire spin, which is nice. And Sundering Strike decreased charge range from 16 to 12, which is fun to understand. It means he doesn't move as far, and if that's the case, that's actually a very good change because it makes it easier to aim. I hope that is how it's going to work, and it's not just the range of the damage itself. Loki gets nerfs, decreased base damage progression from 1 to blah 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 to 0.75 to blah 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 blah. Means the first hit will do less, attack canceling will do a lot less, and that will hit Loki pretty hard. Vanish removed the damage mitigation from this ability, which is absolutely understandable in my opinion. Never made sense that he has an unbreakable stealth with damage mitigation, so that one's nerfed, that one's fair. The base stat's gonna hit him hard, and it's gonna be rough for Loki. Osiris, it's sign off all the buffs that come to the stats and the items. Osiris gets a Sickle Strike buff, decreased base damage from 60 to 260 to 70 to 270, and Spirit Flay increased the base damage from 75 to 290 to 80 to 300. I think it's scary, especially with Sickle Strike actually has a lower cooldown than I realized, and with all the other changes that are coming, I think Osiris is going to be scary. Pili, Everlasting Flame, decreased duration from 6 to 4 seconds, and decreased power from 2 per level to 1. So a little bit of tweaks to her passive here. Her passive was very, very strong, so I think this is understandable, as much as I would have liked to keep the power for punishing enemies. Poseidon base stats increased physical protection from 2.2 per level to 2.6. For some reason he had super low protection, which doesn't make sense. Rare Tusker, there we are, may now sell his Acorn, only do this late game to swap it out for something you really, really need with a boots thingo. Otherwise you're probably burning money. SLOTH Hieroglyphic Assault increased damage from 40 to 120 to 45 to 125, so 15 increase across the board because it's 3 shots. Evade and Punish no longer stuns but pierces through enemies and roots the first guard hits and slows the other enemies hit. Root and slow last for 1.5 seconds at all ranks, and the slow is 30% at all ranks. And Final Judgment, increased scaling from 100 to 120. I think those is going to be scary now, and I don't like the way they handled this, because now all of his abilities are like long range damaging with no way to stop them really, and you can spam his entire kit into a team and still has relatively high safety with his wall dash combo himself. Zeus, various changes that kind of tweak the entire character. Cooldown reduction here on the Aegis Assault, increase from 10 to 12 seconds, but then increased damage on the Detonate charge and increased magical power scaling, as you can see here, but at the same time, the multiplication for the charges after the first one are reduced, and the Lightning Storm damage is adjusted. So there's less, more, and more late, and the scaling is also increased. I've talked about this a little bit more in the past video. It's just wonky, and we have to figure out how exactly that turns out. And that is it. I tried to make this as short as possible while still covering everything, which is quite a lot to do. So yeah, with this, the live viewing should be going up soon as well, and hopefully some PTS today if everything works out. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful and not too long. If you're new to the channel, feel free to smash that subscribe button. And on that, see you for the next one tomorrow or later, depending how it goes with PTS. DukeSloth, out.